Welcome to Praise Hands, home of the Praise Hands, where we are all about creative, cross-cultural Christianity. I'm your host, Robbie Valderrama. Today, we're going to talk about the myth of organic diversity. The fundamental problem facing many of our ministries is that we know diversity should be happening organically, but it's simply not. So that leaves many feeling like they really only have two options. First, leave things as is and let the culture be what it will, which in many cases is painfully segregated. Or second, to artificially plant diverse people on their team with the hopes that those people won't feel like a token and that diverse people will feel more comfortable because of their presence. In this episode with young adult minister and podcast host Patrick Chappell, we discuss a third option: intentional, mission-driven multicultural ministry. If you're a leader who's navigating these issues of culture, please visit us at praisehands.com and reach out on the contact page. We would love to connect with you. But for now, let's enjoy the show. Patrick Chappell.
Hey!
How are you?
What's up, man? I'm here.
This is great. We are here in Nashville, Tennessee, right across from Lipscomb University.
That's right.
This has been an important place for you.
Yeah.
Lipscomb University. We'll probably touch on that in your story.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful spring day. You and I met at Q.
Yes.
2 years ago?
It's crazy.
2 years ago,
Yeah,
right? Yeah,
it's crazy.
A little over 2 years ago. And we've had some good times, good conversations.
Yeah. How recent was your move to Nashville?
Probably moved here maybe a year and a half before that.
So you were here for a year and then we met.
Yeah, right around there.
So you were still kind of
yeah.
finding your bearings
Right, absolutely.
in the city.
Yeah, for sure. And it's been great to get to hang. Patrick is like the big man on campus. Everywhere you go, like he runs into people and just like, you know, people are offering to buy him things. That's just who Patrick is. He's great. He knows everybody and everybody loves him.
Oh my goodness.
And he's the master of the hashtag BlackBoyJoy. You got to give him a
love
royalty
that
when you use that hashtag.
That's right.
Just rolling it in. The reason why I wanted to have you on the show is because I think you're awesome.
Thanks.
And I think that it'd be great for our listeners to hear your story and maybe even what you've had to overcome. To kick us off, I want to ask an open-ended question. Tell us about your childhood.
Oh, man. That's a good question. And I've told my story a lot, which is not a bad thing. And I want to say this at the top before I get into any of the twists and turns of my story, is that the story may hit a listener in a way that it doesn't hit me anymore, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's not like I'm freshly telling about an experience that happened last week. These experiences that I've had time to heal from them. I have time to gain perspective from them, to learn the lessons that they may have. I'm still learning from these things, and I learn something every time that I tell my story. And for me, it's one of those things where I've heard it said before that sometimes truth and reality and just like this happened is so funny, because it's like how the fact that I'm here in a studio recording a podcast in Nashville, Tennessee is just hilarious. Considering the life and childhood that I'm about to talk about, that shouldn't have happened that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Stereotypically, that's not how it should have worked out. But here we are.
Yeah.
Like what?
Yeah.
It just makes you say, well, you know, whether you want to call whatever the thing is God, which that's what I call it, whatever it is that's out there, for me, it's God. It's real. Otherwise, like, this would make no sense.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I grew up in Chattanooga, Tennessee, but I was born in Birmingham, Alabama. My mother and my father were several years apart in age, 10 plus. I think it was more like even 13, 14 years apart, right? As a kid, it was just me and my mom, and that's because my mother and my father had a big falling out. I won't go into the big details, but know that the big thing is violence was a part of it. And because of the violent act that happened, they were not married and could not be married. And that just meant that I had me and my mom. A part of my childhood, I got to watch my mother attempt to date and find connection and relationship only to be met with guys who were not telling the whole truth, meaning they had other families and were not as good as they put off that
Sure.
they would be. And the one thing that probably really shaped my particular upbringing as a kid is mom had a boyfriend and he was a pretty abusive guy. He was abusive to her and abusive to me. And that was like elementary school, that we lived through some of the hardest years of our lives.
Just you and your mom, do you have siblings? Okay.
Yep. And this guy was just not a good guy. The best way I can describe it without getting too like crazy, like here's the things. Some of your fans or some of your listeners have listened or seen the Lifetime movies of like women who are in abusive relationships. Like it was that. I'll never forget a moment where I just got done being beaten and my mom's crying over me while she's trying to help me take a bath. That is in my memory forever. So we have all that. We get past all of that. And I'm growing up and my mom doesn't really go to church. She's probably not happy that I've shared that, but it is what it is. She has good reason because for a lot of folks, they have been a part of so many toxic churches that they can't do it anymore. They're just done. They've seen the pastors steal money, cheat, be abusive, all these things, and they just can't find themselves to just be a part of a faith community like that. She's not anti-church by any means. Not even close. But I grew up, mom saying, if you want to go to church, you can go to church. And I have a godmother. My godmother's name is Mildred, and she just turned 90 years old.
Wow.
It's amazing. But she was the one that brought me to church in Chattanooga. And then I have my aunt and my grandmother, my Aunt Sarah and my grandmother, who kind of my church connection in Birmingham, where I was born. And so every summer when I was in Birmingham, I was in church with my grandmother or with my aunt. My grandmother was going to a Baptist church. My aunt was a part at the time of a Church of God church. And then my godmother in Chattanooga was part of a Church of Christ. Now, if you know anything about those churches and those denominations, very different worship styles.
Right. Yep.
You have kind of a Black Southern Baptist vibe, very charismatic Church of God, dry Church of Christ, like a cappella only, right? No instruments, anything like that. It was filled with spirit, but it was still like compared to those,
Sure.
drier in the sense of like, we're not dancing around the auditorium with the guitars, and it was different, right?
Yeah.
So growing up, when it comes to churches, I always wanted to go.
Why did you want to go?
There's the verse that says that some have the gift of faith. I think that's one of my gifts, is that I've never just been so mad at the church. I'm like, I like this place. This is great. And I love the community. I love the people. People were always kind and welcoming to me. And so I liked going there. I had friends there, and I just found life in the community and hope and peace going to churches. Just always have. But of course, my mom kind of had this thing. It's like, if you say you're going to go, you got to go, right? So my godmother, I would tell her I was going to go. So like I was committed now. And if I didn't want to go, I didn't have to go. Some people grow up in those kind of families where it's like, oh,
sure,
you got to go to church every Sunday, every Wednesday, every Sunday night, everything, right? It was never that way with me. It was like, if you want to go, you can go. But if you say you're going to go, you got to go. I always went, and I always enjoyed it for the most part. I always had questions and always thought some things were different and weird or whatever. But I've done everything from being baptized in the Church of Christ Church at the very mature, wise age of 12. What? I could go on about that,
Sure.
but we won't get into that. To being anointed with oil in the Church of God church. And kind of said, there's a plan set for you, and God is, part of that, yada, yada, yada. So it's like I've had all these different kind of church faith experiences. And that meant that like I never thought one was better than the other. Like some people are like, oh, it's this thing all the way, or it's this thing all the way. Like I never had that in me because I grew up being a part of these like 3 particular streams. Yeah. And I was just like, they're all fine. Like there's nothing wrong with this. This is all good. And so I never grew up, and I'm still that way. Like I like where I serve and what I do, but I don't think that like, oh, we've got it 100%. Right. This is the best thing ever, best way to do it. It's like, no, this is good. And that's good too. So yeah, I'll kind of put a pin on that. Other things about my childhood that are just makes my story interesting. I have scoliosis, which is curvature of the spine. I have a metal rod in my back, which is fun. I'm dyslexic.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I get numbers and letters mixed up sometime. I used to have a huge stuttering problem as a kid. I had a speech therapist.
Wow.
In late elementary and middle school. And now I host a podcast and talk for a living. What? What is this
That's
life?
amazing. So how did that transition happen? You mentioned that coming from the background that I came from, there's no reason why I should be here today.
Yeah.
What were some of those pivotal moments for you? And who were the people that believed in you when you didn't believe in yourself?
Truly, my mother and my godmother, and honestly, just my mom's side of the family. And not that my dad's side of the family didn't believe or support me. I just wasn't around them. I just didn't have that much time with them growing up.
Sure.
But my mother and my aunts and my godmother are some of my biggest fans and champions. My mother has always supported and believed in me in everything that I've wanted to do, even if it was not what she would choose for me to do. I played clarinet, for goodness sake. What? Mainly because I wanted to play saxophone, and the director was like, you got to play clarinet first. I was awful. I was so bad at clarinet. So bad. I wrestled. What? Why? I don't know.
Yeah.
I did it.
Yeah.
It was real bad at that too. But I guess for my mother, my worth was never wrapped up in what I achieved. And even when it came to schooling, the question she would ask is, did you try your best? If you try your best, I'm extremely proud of you. And if I said yes, she's like, oh, I'm proud of you then. And I know just because I've said a lot of people that that's not always how others receive words from their parents. It's like, you can do better. I know you can do better. She would just say, did you do your best? One of the things she said, it's one of the kind of wise words she said to me in a roundabout way, is when I was growing up, we would go shopping for clothes and I would pick out an outfit and I was like, do you like this? And she said, I don't like it, but if you like it, we can buy it because you have to wear it. I don't have to wear it. But if we buy this, you're going to have to wear this all the time because we don't got a lot of money just to be buying random clothes. Yeah. And so the wisdom I got from that is that she will always give her perspective advice on anything that I'm going to do. She says, ultimately, you're going to be the one that has to do that thing. And that's how I live my life. It's that, I want to seek wise counsel, but at the end of the day, like, I'm going to be the one to have to wake up and do whatever it is that I got to do. So she's a big believer in me. Obviously, outside of like the family unit, there was a girl, I cannot remember her name. There was a girl in high school who looked at me dead in the face and said, you need to be on student council and you can be a leader at this high school.
Wow.
She spoke that directly to me and I believed her. Wow. And I did that thing. And I think if she didn't say that to me, and what she didn't know is that I was feeling a bit lost because I played football in 8th grade. I had the back surgery in between 8th and 9th grade. And I was like, that was going to be my potential identity for high school. Right. Yeah. I was like, what am I going to do? And she's like, you can be a leader. You have it. Whatever it is, you have it.
Wow.
You can be a leader. You should do this. So I think her name was Tiffany. I need to like look through my yearbooks to find her. But she was the kind of reason that I even went on this track to like being in student government, taking on leadership roles, believing that I could be a leader of people in any kind of way. So I would give some credit to her. Ooh, who else? Oh, there's been so many that have kind of either intentionally or unintentionally kind of inspired me. And oddly enough, everyone I've mentioned has been a female. That's why, females are amazing. I'll try to dig up a guy.
So here's a question for you. Like speaking of your upbringing, part of the show, we want to help people see from other lenses that are not theirs.
Right.
So growing up in the South as a Black male in church, what was that experience like? And what sort of conversations happened about like the church down the road? Were you in primarily African-American churches? Or were they were multicultural?
So, the Church of Christ was pretty typical as far as like the one we went to was predominantly white or blended, like multicultural. But heavy on the white side, but kind of like, oh, there's
a few sprinkles on the
lots
donut.
of, some Black families and some Hispanic families and things of that nature. And then my churches in Birmingham were all Black. And so I really got to grow up and kind of have experiences in both like all Black churches and mostly white with some diversity kind of within them. And so it was definitely a vibe and a very big difference in summer, the church I went to in the summer and on holidays, and church I was going to during the school year, right? So when we would go to any new church of Christ, particularly in this setting, and we walk in, I automatically get greeted, of course, right? Because I'm a person of color, I'm Black, and it's clear that I'm other in the space,
sure.
right? Whereas in the churches when I was back in the summer and going to Baptist church and Church of God, like it was different because it was a different kind of welcoming. It felt like you were more automatically a part of the family.
You might get like a head nod, but not like, hi, what's your name?
Right,
sure.
Exactly. And then growing up in mostly white spaces, you would obviously get the questions of like, why do Black people, Black churches fill in a blank, right? And now you have to represent all of that. Or it's the comment of, well, you're not like one of those.
Is that coming from
that could be
either
friends?
Side?
Yeah. That could be friends. Or now, and granted too, it's like those people of color who grow up in spaces like I grew up, like a predominantly white high school, maybe somewhat smallly diverse churches. We really have an interesting space that we exist in, right? And everyone who kind of grows up in this kind of feels the same way in their own particular way. But well, a great example comment is, well, you're the whitest Black person I know. You're not like black.
That was told to you.
Oh, those are direct quotes from individuals to me.
Yeah.
Right?
Were they trying to like compliment you, or what were they trying to do? Like,
I guess. And then on the other side of the fence, it's like, oh, you be hanging out with them white folks all the time.
Yeah.
Look at the way you talk. You're one of them.
Yeah.
Right? So you really do find yourself sometimes in isolation because it's like, who do I belong to?
Sure. Right.
Or even growing up in the churches and schools that I grew up in, it's like I knew that some people didn't invite me to their homes because their parents. Because I grew up in the 90s, so even though you couldn't be like hardcore racist in the 90s, like you could definitely like be low key. You can still be low key, like obviously, but it's like I know because people would say, "Oh, well, I would," but you get the vibe, right?
But right.
Even in dating, it's kind of like, well, I would date you, but my grandparents are my mom or my dad.
Right.
And so like you just feel like I'm just a kid or a teenager. I'm just being like what my surrounding is. I'm just trying to belong to the space that I've been placed into.
And this is in the 90s. This is not like in the 50s, before the civil rights.
No, In Chattanooga, right.
Yeah, in Chattanooga in the South. So a couple questions on that. As someone who has been at the receiving end of that subtle or overt racism, how has that shaped your lens? And also, how have you not gotten like bitter about that? Or maybe you're just a super bitter person. But I know you're not. No,
it truly has. I give a lot of grace to a lot of people, and to myself included, because I know that it's not their fault. It's not my friend's fault, the way that he or she thinks about this thing and is reacting. It's not completely their fault. Like they were brought up in a particular way and they're trying to make sense of like, well, our friendship or what I'm actually experiencing is different than what my aunt or uncle or grandparent or my family has been saying about X, right? So they're trying to make sense of it, and they're growing in understanding and growing in. So I have a lot of grace for folks. And truthfully, because I have the skin color that I have, I am able to speak and be in spaces that others couldn't. So I have graced myself to like, I'm not going to always say the right thing or always get it right or always do the right thing, but I am in the space, so I have an opportunity. So let me use the space and the opportunities that I have well, and let me try my best to help others, see where people are coming from, to help my family and help other folks who are Black to say, I hear what you're saying, but you can't say all, because all fill in the blank is not like that. You're talking about a person, and let's talk about that particular experience. But all are not like that. Why do I know all are not like that? Because I have met people who are not like that.
Right.
And that's on either side, right?
Right. It takes someone that has their foot in multiple cultures to be able to push back on that a little bit and say, hey, that's actually not true.
Right.
And if people are not in both spaces, how would they know that all people aren't like that?
That's right.
Anything they see on the media is going to be the most extreme caricature of whatever demographic you're looking for, and will feed the, oh man, they're all like that mentality.
Yeah. And here's the reality, right? Because you befriend Black people, Latino people, any person of color, biracial or white or whatever, when you're friends with people, like truly friends, not just like I'm friends to get you to do a thing, right? Like come to my event, so I'm kind of friends with you, but like truly in a relationship with people. In that moment, are you able to call out, and people are able to hear the call out to something wild that they say, right? What did you just say?
Yeah.
That ain't no. Right. And it's like, because they know, like, I'm your friend.
Right.
I'm not just some random that is trying to challenge you. It's like, no. We have history. We're friends. We've lived some life together, and we're in this thing. And so I get to call a thing out that I probably couldn't do otherwise if I was just some random on the street or in a meeting or at a rally or whatever, right?
It seems like it's pretty important for us to have friends that don't look like us.
Yeah, a little bit.
So digging in a little bit more on kind of your experiences growing up, where you went in the majority white culture and you felt a little other there. You went in the Black culture in Birmingham, you felt like the other there in certain respects. Speaking about this intersection of church and race, what can church leaders do to create atmospheres that are welcoming, but don't make people feel just like the token Black guy or the token white person?
Well, I think it's true that whatever your church structure is, so whether you have elders or shepherds or bishops or your leaders, whoever is truly in the seat of power of the organization, there has to be diversity there for people to say, okay, well, there's diversity, right? Even if there's one. But for sure, if you can have more than one, that's very, very helpful for folks. I think that as a church, you need to find a space that is natural for you. But at the same time, you have to recognize and understand that sometimes on the road to diversity, there can be a little awkwardness. And it's going to feel like you're really trying. Well, yeah, we're trying to be diverse. Like, that's the key word, is trying. So in order to try, we have to do certain things to try and move in that way.
Right.
That's understandable. You're trying to be this particular way. That takes sometimes some awkwardness. It takes some kind of like being kind of goofy about it, but like eventually it will become very natural and it will just happen organically. But people always want something to happen organically, but sometimes you have to have some intentionality on the way to being organic about it.
I remember in my first couple of years of playing music, I was in a Celtic band, and
do people know that on your show? Like, is that a known fact that you were in a Celtic
I might have
band?
mentioned it, but there's some good stories there, as you can imagine. But when we first started playing, I was 14 at the time when the band started, and all of us like would just stand on stage, look down at our instruments. We had no like performance training. We would just go almost play. And some of the best advice that we were given is, hey, why don't you just watch back at your performances and see how it looks? See if it looks natural. See if it looks how you want to be looking. And what we realized is there was a disconnect. I was totally enjoying playing that music, but I looked like I wanted to kill somebody because I was just so focused on my part. And what we had to learn is how to match how we were coming across with the reality of what we were experiencing as that communal expression of music. And it was a little awkward for a while to try to get that to match. But once we were able to get that more figured out, the people that were coming in from the outside were able to more easily enter in that experience of joy and of celebration of the music that we were creating. And they were able to be invited into that experience instead of just kind of feeling like on the outside of it. And I think it's the same thing with churches. What we had to do is look at ourselves from the outside in and from that video and say, oh, wow, that looks a little awkward. Sometimes what we need to do is look at ourselves from a different lens and say, how does this look from other people's perspective? And then not in a fake way. The reason why we did that training was not to be fake. It was to actually more authentically express what was really happening. And I think one of the problems that churches get into is their changes are perception driven, but not mission driven. And because of that, the changes that they might make are not actually to better reflect who they are. They are to better reflect who they think people think that they should be.
Yeah. Another good point to make is most of the time, whether you're predominantly a Black church or whatever, and you have the one fill in the blank, or you're predominantly white church and you have the one or two fill in the blank, the leaders would get in the room and say, we want to be more diverse. We want to have more whatever. But no person has ever talked to the one or two people, families or whatever, that are at their church that are that, whatever that is, right? They just assume like, well, we got to have more, obviously, like we got to make them feel more welcome, It's like, have you had that conversation? What I'm not saying is you bring in your Black individual or family and sit them in the middle of the room of all of the leaders and say, tell us how to get more Black folks in here.
Right.
It's like, no, like send someone hopefully has relationship with that particular member or attending person, whatever, and say, hey, I would love to take you to lunch or to coffee and let's just talk.
And what I've tried to model is if I'm going to someone who's a different culture than me, I always try to go to them.
Right.
I don't try to say, hey, you enter my turf so I can learn more about you. No, if I want to learn more about you, I got to come to you.
So, hey, I see you, if y'all been coming here, and just name it. Like, I'm just curious, like, how is it for you? What do you see happening moving forward in this way? This is something that we want. Like, what do you think about this? Like, and again, this is a word for all church leaders, faith community leaders is, if you do this, if you take or meet the person who is other, that could be as far as when it comes to race, or gender or whatever it is, if you ask them for their perspective, their suggestions, whatever it may be, don't ask something and don't pursue something you're not ready to like move forward with.
Yeah, otherwise it's just placating.
You're just placating. And people know it. You're not fooling anyone by pretending like, oh, well, we talked to the brown folks. We talked to the one white couple in our church. Now we're all good. We had a conversation about it.
Yep.
Right?
You check the box.
Yeah.
There's a really interesting article that I came across recently, and it talked about kind of 3 levels of connection, if you will, or mentality towards ministry. One is working for, the second is working with, and the third is being with. And the mentality that oftentimes we can have when it comes to ministry, or even if you look at like international outreach or missions, is working for. Oh, we have privilege. We're going to work for these people. We're going to fix this problem. And over time, it becomes pretty evident that just reinforces whatever hierarchy is there. And if you throw money at, oftentimes that's not necessarily helping. Working with is a step in the right direction in a lot of cases because, acknowledging some commonality, you're saying, hey, we're doing this together. But the destination, I think, is just being with. And what this article talked about was that Jesus in his time on earth, he spent 30 years just being with.
Right.
And then he worked with, and then, he worked for on the cross. So I think that's an important model where if we're looking at how to be more diverse or how to be more accepting or whatever, I think the starting point is not working for, it's being with and working in that direction.
Yeah, I like that. That's good.
So moving on a little bit with your story, you ended up at Lipscomb University, which we're right next to.
Yeah.
And you are now on staff at Otter Creek, just a few miles away from here. Of all the things you could be doing, why talk about this Jesus guy and why be in church ministry?
Wow, that's good. It's not because I wanted to. I definitely was not one of those teens that was like, I'm going to be a minister when I grow up one day.
You don't strike me as that type.
Yeah, I was never that type. I never had on my Pinterest board or dream board, I'm going to be a minister one day. And it came actually while I was at Lipscomb, and I went to the Impact Camp. I went to be a counselor at that camp because my friends were working it. and I did not want to stay at home for the whole summer in Chattanooga. So I came up to this camp and I worked it. And I was a counselor for teens. And these youth ministers were like, dude, you need to go into ministry. These teens love you. You connect. You are so relevant.
Another encouraging, life-giving word that someone spoke into you.
Yeah, some dudes. There we go.
Got some dudes.
I'll give ministry credit. And not a lot of people know this about my story. I will give ministry credits to two people. Corey Trevathan, who's a minister out in Texas now, full-time pulpit minister, and Rob Touchstone, oddly enough,
wow,
who helped start the well and do a lot of cool things. But they were co-youth ministers at a church in Huntsville, Alabama.
Wow.
And they were two of the first people who said, we want you to come and work for us and be an intern. You would be amazing. Please do this.
I didn't realize you went that far back with Rob.
Yeah. So I give them a lot of credit because they were a part of that. So anyway, now I believe that there are certain men and women who are gifted with helping to create space for others. And I think that's one of my gifts. And it brings me much joy to help create spaces for people to experience God, community, relationship, growth. I love to be a part of people having that one aha moment of like, oh, that's it. And it could happen not because of something that I said, but something they experience and a thing that we help create, whether that was a retreat or a worship gathering or like a series that we created on a Sunday morning, whatever it is, I love to help partner in creating those spaces for people. And I am probably rare, and there's several folks who probably fit the same group. It's like, I don't necessarily feel like, oh, I've got to find the way for me to speak and speak often in front of large amounts of people. I don't mind doing it, but I would rather be the person that can open the door so that Robbie can come and speak. Connection and empowering is things that I love because there's not enough people who are trying to do that for other folks.
Yeah.
And I think truly, here's what I will say when it comes to the empowerment piece. Because I bear witness to lots of disempowerment and lots of people who take advantage of folks and who overlook folks, because I've seen that maybe in my own life, and for sure in my family and other folks that I love and care for. I'm like, now that I have some credibility, some access to opening the doors, creating the path, like I will use all of it to help someone.
Yeah, no, that's so good. So speaking about making those connections, empowering, coming from Church of God, Church of Christ, Church of Baptist, you have all these different ones. What can the body of Christ across a city like Nashville do to make those connections and be a more unified body?
I think you said something earlier that is very true and can be very helpful. It's being in other people's space. If you are in a church that is only a cappella worship, going to be in a space that is not that space and seeing what is bringing life to other people and vice versa. And if you've never been to like a full-blown gospel music service, going and experiencing that and not going as a spectator, but going to participate, right? Not going
and
to
honoring
say,
the place.
Yeah, not going to say, oh, look how cool this is. This is so cool we get to experience. Like, no, like I'm going to fully give myself to this worship experience like I do in my own space.
Yeah.
So if my own natural leaning is like full on gospel band, but I go to the Church of Christ a cappella worship, like I'm going to get into it like I'd be getting into the thing that I do at my own place.
Yeah.
Because I think when you do that, you say, oh, yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Because ultimately, I would say that if you're this Jesus person, I should be able to pluck you down into any worship service across the world. And even if you don't understand the language, you can still worship.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't matter if it's lasers or stomp and clap, like everybody's wearing boots and like, banjoing,
Cowboy church.
Whatever it is. It's like, I don't care. I can worship here. But we've bought in to this consumeristic thing, which we've talked about many a times. And we say, no, this is the flavor that I like. So I want to do this. It's like you're cutting yourself off. So if we think about worship in like a pie, you've got gospel music as a slice of the pie. You've got Chris Tomlin type worship as a piece of the pie. You've got choir music. You've got Celtic. You've got a cappella worship. You've got hip hop infusion church. You've got all these different pieces of the pie. What we have decided to do is only eat one little piece of the pie. The whole pie is good. Why would you not want to eat the whole pie? Pies are delicious.
Yeah.
Eat the whole pie. Like, why are we limiting ourselves by saying, I want to get this one little bitty piece of pie? That's it.
Yeah.
Like, you're not on Whole30 right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're off of it. You're on a break.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, eat the whole pie because the whole pie is delicious.
Yeah.
Not just one little piece of it.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. So we've talked a good amount about your upbringing being in majority white, in all Black churches. Now you're on staff at a predominantly white church here in the Nashville area of Tennessee. In that context, as a person of color on that staff, what is that like? And how do you feel like the way that you minister has been impacted by that?
Yeah. At least from my perspective, I don't think, and I truly believe this, that I was a Black hire, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't think that the church I'm at said, we want a Black minister and we want that one.
You felt known for you.
I felt known for me.
Mm-hmm.
I think that if anything, the beauty of me being there is that it has helped some people ask questions they've not been able to ask of someone who's of color because their circles don't reflect that yet. So when he's one of our ministers, I feel like I'm safe to ask him his perspective about this. And they can't because you're one of the parishioners. So, of course, I would love to talk to you about whatever you want to talk about, right? So I think that I've had some really good conversations around race and culture that I probably wouldn't have if I was at a church that was predominantly Black.
Do you feel like Christian leaders need to address issues of race and culture?
Absolutely. It is foolish otherwise. I'll say
So
it.
what would you say to a church that it's just not in their lane to talk about issues of race and culture? And they're like, man, I feel like we probably should do something about this, but it just feels really awkward when we try. Like, what's a first step that a church like that can take?
The first step is read a book. There are too many books out there. Stop reading those white theologian books that you be reading and read some other books. So if you don't feel yet comfortable in talking face-to-face to someone, a book is so easy to pick up and do. And I think a lot of pastors on any side of this, you are living in fear. You are afraid to have the conversation.
Sure.
And I'm pretty sure when I read about Jesus' teaching and I read the Bible, it says, do not fear a whole lot.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going to teach your congregation not to live in fear and live in faith, start living that yourself.
Yeah.
Because you're being afraid to talk about culture. You're being afraid to talk about race. Why? You think you're going to lose people? And there's always this fear of like, what if people leave if we talk about this thing? It's like, they're not leaving being a Christian, or at least a brand of Christian. They're leaving your congregation. Sometimes some people got to leave, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Like, be okay with stepping in. Well, what if it's one of the rich people? You trifling if you're doing that. To use a very kind of a word that's in the Black community a lot. Don't be that way. Stop living in fear. Like, it's good to have those conversations. It's good to live in a space that is uncomfortable. Go there, read a book. If you're fine to do it, then it start to having conversations. Like, guess what? There are a lot of churches in the city that you live that have a lot of different kinds of pastors and leaders. Guess what they all have? Phone numbers and email addresses. Oh, they're not answering your phone calls or emails. Guess what else you can do? You can get in your car.
Mm-hmm.
You can drive it to the church. Hi.
Yep.
Like, it's so easy to do.
Right.
It's so easy to do, to have those conversations, to put yourself out there. But people, oh, well, I'm busy and I don't know. I don't have the. if it's important, you'll find the time and you'll get into those spaces and have those conversations because it's important.
And that's good. You mentioned some of the things that you went through growing up. How did you recover and how did you receive healing?
Oh, wow. Yeah. I would say that the way that healing came for me is I truly think that's where the churches that I was a part of, they played a hand in that. Those community of people loved me, even though they didn't know all the things that were happening. The love and support that they showed me when I was a kid was very important. I would say that also outside of the church community, when I was a kid, I was a part of the boys club for a little bit. And the boys club was good in helping with that too, and building confidence and finding a couple of male leaders and just community in that way. And so I would say a combination of those things, and honestly, the mysterious work of the Spirit and the resilience of my mother helped me not fall into a path that could have led to a gang, to drugs. Because seriously, like when you look at all the things that happened in my childhood.
You had all the boxes checked to go in that direction.
I had all the boxes checked. Mm-hmm. And anyone who would have heard my story would have said, yeah, makes sense. What makes no sense is the fact that I do what I do now and in the spaces that I'm in now. Like, that's like, what? How? So I would say that the church community, they were supportive and poured into me in ways that mattered. And they didn't even know they were doing it. And so again, it goes to that whole idea of like, you never know how you're impacting a child by what you say and what you're like around them and the support and the love and encouragement you show to them. So show it and show it freely because you never know what's happening in the background, right? And I really think that my mother's resilient nature and her example to me of like, we're not going to get stuck here. Mm-hmm. We're going to keep moving forward.
Mm-hmm. That's good. Yeah. That's really good. Well, anything else you want to say? How can people learn more about you and what you're doing?
Well, I have all the social medias. I have my own podcast, the Patrick Podcast. Of course, it's called the Patrick.
Of course.
What? Who do I think I am?
He's the Patrick.
Yeah, not the Patrick. Yeah, it's just Patrick. Yeah. So you can follow me on that. I have Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Otter Creek Church is where I'm at. If you are looking for a place, we'd love to have you. If you need help finding a place, if you're out there and you're like, I just want to find a church and I don't know where to go and I don't know, especially if you live in the Nashville area or even in other cities. I've traveled and met a lot of different folks around this country. I love helping people find a church that is right for them. So I freely send people to a lot of different places. And people are like, shouldn't you try to get them to come to your church? Maybe, but that's not what this is about.
Right. That's good. That's good.
Yeah. So it's like, if it's this place or this place, and I feel like that place is the place that's going to bring you life and connect you. Well, let me connect you to some friends I got to go there.
Yeah.
Right. Go there.
Yeah.
Thrive there.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah. That's awesome. Me.
Well, thank you for being on the Praise Hands podcast today, Patrick.
Praise Hands.
Praise Hands. Hashtag Praise Hands.
I love it.
Love it, man. Thanks again.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for tuning in to today's episode. If you're new to Praise Hands, welcome. Be sure to leave us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, subscribe on YouTube, and follow us on Instagram at Praise Hands Official. And if you're hungry to get involved with what we're doing here, visit praisehands.com, where you can click Get Involved to join a growing volunteer team or even become a monthly financial supporter of this podcast. And again, if you're a leader who's looking to tackle this complex intersection of church, race, music, and economics with integrity, we would love to meet you. Visit praisehands.com and tap Contact to get in touch. Glad to have you on this journey with us. We'll see you next week.